It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to jump on the Sharp Interactive board. I got the magic pen in my hand. I want to go through HP's FY23. The numbers are in, and obviously HP had a massive decline in revenue, over $9 billion decline in revenue. You'll also see that we have a red flag warning, and I put the red flag warning sign there because HP also has a stockholders deficit going on. I don't know what it will be for FY 2023 because the 10K is not out, but when I looked at the 10K for 21 and 22 years, they got a stockholder deficit that's growing. That's never a good thing by any stretch of the imagination. We'll talk about that in today's episode. But I know some of you are saying, well, Ray, we saw Enrique Lores out there on the financial networks talking about how great things were for FY 2023 for HP. Ladies and gentlemen, I saw those interviews too, and I'll tell you this. I told you a while back that when I see leaders in our industry going out in the marketplace talking about alternative realities or gaslighting realities, that I was going to do a counterpoint, and I would base the counterpoint in actual facts and reality. HP, what in the world are you doing? This is what the CEO says as he's being interviewed for delivering probably the worst year-over-year growth the company's ever had. Okay? It declined by over $9 billion. And this is what he says. AI computers could be 60% of the PC market by 2027. Look over there, there's a squirrel. What the hell? Who cares? Who cares if AI computers could be 60% of the PC market by 2027? This is absurdity. And the fact that these analysts did dig deeper into Enrique and really start questioning him, they should have asked him right then when he said that, Enrique, we have a question for you. In FY 2023, you stopped telling the world whether the revenue increased or declined regarding notebooks. You stopped telling the world in 2023 whether the units placed declined or increased in notebooks. Why is that? Were the numbers declining so much you got embarrassed? Are people not buying the Chromebook? Are people not buying the notebooks? Ladies and gentlemen, this is important because the notebook revenue represents over 40% of HP's total revenue, and they don't even tell you anymore whether that revenue is growing or declining or whether those units are growing or declining. That's a warning sign. What are they trying to hide? When they stopped doing that, I came in and I did an episode on that. This is a big damn deal, and none of these analysts are questioning it. I'm reading through the PowerPoint presentation, and I come across this, and, they always like to talk about what's good going on, the growth areas at HP. Listen to this headline. Key growth areas. Collectively grew 10% quarter over quarter, 2 times faster than total revenue. What the hell? This is absurdity. This is just bullshit. This doesn't even make any sense. Your year-on-year decline is over $9 billion, and you're going to sit here and tell us collectively grew 10% quarter over quarter, 2 times faster than total revenue. Hybrid system, quarter over quarter revenue grew. It's so easy for these leaders to go out there and talk about crap that they don't substantiate. So Enrique Lores wants to talk about the hybrid systems, the gaming, and he doesn't tell us any of the revenue numbers. He doesn't share the details of that. It just grew 2 times faster? Is that a way to gaslight the reality that the company just declined by over $9 billion year on year? I wanted to look at Enrique Lores and the leadership team and some of the things that have happened to the company since they've taken over. We know that Enrique Lores was appointed the CEO in November of 2019, which means 2020 was his first year in charge. And folks, let's look at some key components. The first thing I wanted to look at the debt. In 2019, before Enrique took over, the company had $5.1 billion in debt. The year that he took over, it was $6.2 billion in debt. In FY 2021, it ended with $7.5 billion in debt. He's growing that debt. And in 2022, it ended in $11 billion in debt. The 10K for 2023 is not out yet. But if you take it off the presentation material, it looks like they paid down some of the debt, but the gross debt is now $9.6 billion. But ladies and gentlemen, that just means that Enrique Lores and his team doubled the debt since they've taken charge of the company, and they doubled that debt in 4 years. And they're doing some things that I think are nuts, and I believe that Enrique Lores, this is my belief, that he will, in fact, go down in history as the worst CEO that HP ever had. And they're going to look back and they're going to study what he did, all the stock buybacks, the acquisitions that he made, the inability to really grow the company and change the direction of the company. And they're going to realize that all the subscriptions they were bragging about, subscriptions, and the hybrid worker and all that was irrelevant. They're going to realize that this leadership team bought a company called Poly with revenues of $1.7 billion. They put that company's revenue into the personal systems business unit, but yet the personal system business unit is down over $8 billion year on year with $1.7 billion in new revenue. Ladies and gentlemen, why aren't the analysts questioning them? They bought a company called HyperX, which is a pretty good substantial company. I don't know what the revenue on that was. I'm guessing about $400 million. I couldn't find it anywhere. But think about it. They closed that in 2021. This is telling me that organically this company is declining rapidly. And the only way that they can offset some of that decline is to make these acquisitions, but these acquisitions aren't doing anything for them. And this is scary. Because wouldn't it be nice to know what the profit is around Poly? What the revenue is around Poly? What the revenue is around notebooks? It's important, ladies and gentlemen. They lump it all together. They're trying to hide stuff. They're trying to distract people and gaslight people from the realities of where that company's going. Here are the numbers. So the year-over-year decline for the whole company is $9.265 billion. Their top line revenue for the whole company was $53,718 million. And they had a year-over-year decline of $9.265 billion. If you look at the printing business, net revenue was $18,029 million, $873 million year-over-year decline. If you look at the personal systems, $35.7 billion, year-over-year decline, $8,361 million. But I want us to focus in for a second on the personal systems. Because, ladies and gentlemen, that's where they put the Poly revenue. This is important. Because the year-over-year decline, you have to add the Poly revenue. Because it wasn't in the 2022 number. And it's in the 2023 number. The only part of Poly that was in 2022 was in the fourth quarter of 2022. And that should have been about $400 million. If you look at Poly and what they were doing when they were a publicly traded company, the year before HP bought them, they did about $1.7 billion in revenue. Ladies and gentlemen, that means that there's like $1.2, $1.3 billion worth of revenue in this $35 billion number that came from Poly. Which means they're really about $1 billion more decline year on year in the personal systems group. This is why it's so important to understand what's going on with notebooks. Because notebooks is 40% of the revenue of the total company. But guess what? It's over 60% of the personal systems business unit. That's why they stopped telling the world what it was. And they're going to try to fool you with some of these acquisitions. If you look back at 2017, total revenue for the company was $52,056 million. Under the leadership of Enrique Lores, guess what? You got to go back to 2017 to find a worse year than he delivered in 2023. 2023, the revenue was $53,718 million. We all know that in 2017 is when the acquisition of Samsung was made. In 2018, the numbers showed up. But ladies and gentlemen, Enrique Lores took over in 2020, the first year he took over, and I realized we walked into a global pandemic. But the revenue declined a couple billion from 2019. Then he had the bubble. They had the bubble in 2020 and 21. 21 and 22, HP was in this bubble. They thought it was based on their skill. They thought it was based on them being this great company. They were going to change the world. They were going to be a $100 billion company. They got all excited. And ladies and gentlemen, during that bubble, I screamed at y'all and said it's a bubble. Okay? I told y'all it's a bubble. Sooner or later, the bubble's going to pop. Well, the bubble popped in FY23, and here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look at FY 2020, 21, 22, and 23 results, at the end of the day, 2021 was a bubble. They did $63.5 billion in revenue. I did an episode during that year, and I told you this has to do with supply and demand. This has to do with them raising their prices. This has to do with nothing but supply and demand, and eventually the supply would get corrected, the demand would fall in line, and HP would be pressured by competition, and it would collapse, and the bubble would pop. That's exactly what happened. In 2022, they started to decline. They were down $524 million. And of course, in 2023, they're down $9.265 billion. But ladies and gentlemen, when you add in the poly revenue, it's like $11 billion decline. They declined $11 billion from their bubble. I wanted to take FY21, 22, and 23, look at the personal systems business. I want to only focus on notebooks for this exercise. But ladies and gentlemen, there's a story here on the Sharp Interactive board that y'all need to pay attention to. When you start out in 2021, the first quarter, total units were up 15%. This is when they were counting notebooks. They were all excited about it. Notebook revenue up 23% year over year, and units were up 33% year over year. When you go into the second quarter of 2021, notebook revenue up 47% year over year. What a huge number, 47%. They're having parties at HP. Oh my God, we're the new kings of notebooks. And units were up 63%. They were so excited. When you get into the third quarter, well, the revenue was flat year over year. Units were up 2%. They got a little slap in the face. Oh, I guess things are coming back down to normal. And then, ladies and gentlemen, guess what? The fourth quarter of 2021, revenue went up 13% year over year, but units were down 12%. And that's when I did an episode when that happened. And I said, look, here's the deal, folks. The only reason the revenue's up because they're able to raise their prices, but we need to focus on how many units they're putting out there. Because the units tells you who's buying their machines, right? Well, the units were declining. The revenue was going up. That's all based on supply and demand. That's not based on anything but that. And as soon as the supply gets straightened out, guess what happens? Competition comes in. You're not able to raise your prices anymore. When you go into the first quarter of 2022, notebooks, revenue up 14% year on year, units down 9%. You come into the second quarter of FY 2022, notebook revenue up 3% year on year, units down 23%. That was an alarm bell. Now HP is getting a little bit nervous. They're like, oh, maybe Ray was right when he was talking about we're only benefiting because we're able to raise our prices during a supply crisis. Total notebooks revenue third quarter of 2022 down 10% year on year, and the units were down 32% year on year. Now HP's freaking out. I'm sure Enrique got the team together and said, look, we got one more quarter, but if notebooks are still going down in 2023, we're not going to tell the world anything about notebooks anymore. We're taking it off the 10K and we're going to take it out of our presentations. We're going to lump all this business into two categories and just lump it all together and hope nobody pays attention. Well, guess what happened? Well, the fourth quarter of 2022, notebook revenue down 23% year on year and units down 26%. HP had enough. They couldn't tell the world anymore how few notebooks and Chromebooks they were selling, so they stopped doing it. Quarter one, FY 2023, they just call it units now. Total units down 28%. Total units down the second quarter, 28%. Total units up in the third quarter by 3%. Boy, that was a big boost, wasn't it? What was up? Was it the gaming? Was it notebooks? Was it Chromebooks? What was it? Total units flat for the last quarter of the year. Something else happened during this time, ladies and gentlemen. In between that second and third quarter of FY 2022, Mr. Warren Buffett said, maybe I ought to buy some of this stock. I'm telling you, I don't know why he did this. I think he flipped a coin or something, but at the end of the day, he did. He bought in. He spent about $5 billion. When he did it, I did an episode. I said I wouldn't take this too serious because $5 billion to Warren Buffett is pocket change. He probably found it on his couch. This wasn't a big deal. What's more of a big deal? Well, when he got out. And he got out in the fourth quarter of 2023. He's had enough. He had like a 12% equity in the company, and now he got rid of it. He's down below 10. At least he didn't have to report it anymore. I believe he bailed out completely. What made him bail out? And that's important. That's an alarm bell because Warren Buffett doesn't do things on a whim. You know? And I believe when he does things on a whim, if he accidentally does them, he gets out really quick. Because he's a long-term guy. The fact that he bailed out of HP is telling you something. He doesn't have confidence in the leadership. He doesn't have confidence that HP can turn this thing around. He's starting to look at the reality of the numbers. Well, if notebooks are falling off a cliff, and that represented over 40% of their revenue, and print's falling off a cliff, the supply business, maybe I shouldn't be investing in this company. I'm pretty sure that's what Warren thought. Ladies and gentlemen, let's look at print. The only thing I want to address on print over these 3 years is the supplies, because we know that the supply revenue is a big part of HP's revenue. The supply business represents 20% of HP's total revenue, but most of its profit. Let's look at the first quarter of 2021. Supply revenue up 3%. The second quarter, supply revenue up 17%. Oh, they were getting excited because we started that bubble, right? We're getting into that bubble. Supply revenue up 20% the third quarter of 2021. And then we get to the fourth quarter of 2021, and guess what happened? All those subscriptions they sold, I guess people canceled them because it went down 2%. And then it went down another 2%. And then the next quarter it went down 6%. And the next quarter it went down 9%. And the next quarter it went down 10%. And then we get into 2023, and it went down 7% in the first quarter, and it went down 4% in the second quarter, 2% in the third quarter, and oh, it's up 3%, whippy. Ladies and gentlemen, I talked about this on other episodes, but they've had 7, 8 quarters of decline in supply business, an area of the company that represents a lot of their profit. 2 critical components, notebooks and supplies, being ignored by the marketplace, allowing their CEO to gaslight these realities. It's amazing to me. Ladies and gentlemen, let's look at the print business. This right here is off the 10K for FY2022. It's right here in the middle of the screen. And those were the numbers that were delivered in supplies, commercial, and consumer, the categories of print. And I wanted to compare those to the numbers for FY2023. And since the 10K is not out yet, I had to go by the percentages that HP shares in their little PowerPoint presentation. And I did it. I took 21% of the total of 5317. I came up with 11,281,000,000, and so on and so forth. But when I got done with that exercise, I found out that the number was actually less, so I got to wait for the 10Q, or the 10K to come out. That's why I hate these presentation material they put together. The 10Ks are so much more information. It's so much more formal. But just based on this, ladies and gentlemen, the supply business is down $481 million from 2022. The only thing that was up was commercial, was up by $72 million. Consumer was down by $229 million. And total printing was down $638 million. When in all reality, it was actually down $873 million. So we're missing $235 million off their little pie chart. But ladies and gentlemen, this is critical stuff. Enrique Lores, he talks all the time about these stupid subscriptions, and I've been talking about where's the math behind the subscriptions. How many are active? How many are inactive? What's the average volume? How long do they keep them? What are they actually going on? And ladies and gentlemen, we would all have to admit that any subscription business would affect supplies and consumer. But yet those numbers are down. Right? I mean, that's just reality. I think it's a question. I wanted to look at the print business and go back to 2020, 2021, and 2022. The print business as a category, supplies represent 60% plus of the revenue of the whole group. So over 20% of the revenue of the whole company, but over 60% of the printing group. Just like notebooks, over 60% of the personal business group. These are 2 important business components that HP is neglecting. But ladies and gentlemen, when you go to 2018 and you go on the 10K at 2018, print total business was $20,805,000,000. If you look at what print delivered in FY 2022 and in FY 2023, we are literally down $2.3 billion. 19% decline from 2018. That's huge. That's an indication there's a problem. The subscriptions aren't bailing them out. Paper on subscription is not bailing them out. And they can go out and they can buy and add revenue by buying up companies and burying it all in there and hoping no one pays attention. But the world needs to pay attention to HP supplies and HP's notebooks, because those 2 things are HP, regardless of all the hype. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to end with this slide. Stockholder deficit. In 2021, the stockholder deficit was $1.6 billion. In 2022, the stockholder deficit was $2.9 billion. I don't know what it is for 2023, but I'm expecting about $3 billion. But ladies and gentlemen, look at this. Liabilities, $41.5 billion. And by the way, this is off the 10K for FY 2022. $41.5 billion in liabilities. Total assets of $38.6 billion. And ladies and gentlemen, inside those assets of $38.6 billion, $8.5 billion of it's goodwill, 22%. This company is on a slippery slope. You know, negative shareholder equity is always a warning sign, ladies and gentlemen. It's always a warning sign. And unfortunately, the analysts allow Enrique Lores to talk about how PCs are going to be AI driven by 2027. I think he needs to answer the questions about all the stock buybacks. I think he needs to answer the questions about the Poly acquisition and where the hell that revenue's at. I think he needs to answer the questions about notebooks and what's the reality of the notebook and the Chromebook. There's a lot of things at play at HP. I'll continue to stay on it because everybody watching me knows this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo, and I'll see you all tomorrow.